Hello and welcome to the video explanation of sentence diagrams for week 8. We are working with more clauses this week, specifically relative clauses in this assignment. So remember that you've got two diagrams going on in most of these and two sentence patterns to identify. Again, the first thing I do is look at a couple of things. One is subject and verb, and one is those red flag words that indicate you've got a clause following. So either expletives, interrogatives, or the relative pronouns. So we start with Florence Nightingale, and the verb is, and then we have the name, a noun, as an subjective complement. So we have subject, verb, be verb, noun. It's pattern 3. And then we hit this relative pronoun that. Keep in mind that it's going to be part of the sentence diagram for the clause. So keep going and look for your subject, verb, and your clause. So new clause, new diagram. We have people as our subject, recognize as our verb, and what are they recognizing? They recognize that, referring back to this first part of the sentence. So that becomes our direct object. So people recognize that, and then we add our most as a modifier, and we have a pattern 7. And the last thing you have to do is figure out how these clauses are connected. So what are we kind of giving more detail about? It's not just Florence Nightingale, it's her name that people recognize. That's what's being described in the clause. So we draw a dotted line from that name to the relative pronoun that's replacing it. So that's how we connect these two diagrams. She is the individual who brought nursing into the modern age. We have, here is our interrogative, or our pronoun. So that's where we're going to kind of split things. So on the first part, we're going to say she is our subject, is the be verb, and individual is a noun. So we've got another pattern 3. And then we start on our clause. We've got a verb, if we just keep going, and a direct object, but no subject. So we know that who is functioning as the subject of this next clause. So we have who is the subject, brought as our action verb, brought what? Brought nursing is the direct object, and then we have a prepositional phrase. And so that is subject, transitive verb, direct object, makes it a pattern 7. Then we add our prepositional phrase into the modern age. You could look at that as a when question or a where question. In either case, excuse me, it's functioning as an adverb. So it's going to go below the verb in this clause. So again, preposition on the slant, nouns always on the horizontal, and our modifiers below. And then we just have to figure out how these things are related. We have our who is our connecting word here, and who is modifying what? We're not talking about the individual, but she, specifically Florence Nightingale. So that is how we're connecting those. We're taking she, the Florence Nightingale, is the one who brought nursing into the modern age. In this one, our subject is Florence, and our verb is lived. And then we have a prepositional phrase talking about when, so that's going to be diagrammed under the verb. And that's the first part of our sentence because we hit that red flag word next. So we have subject and action verb intransitive, which makes it a pattern 6. So now we have a new clause and a new diagram. Our subject is women. Had is our action verb. Had what? Choices is our direct object. And then we have our two modifiers, few and vocational. And then we go back and we need to diagram the when as a part of our diagram. When is an adverb question, so it goes below the adverb. Now, how are these connecting? What is when kind of replacing? And that is era. We're talking about a time period when. So we draw a line from our noun era to the when that's in our second diagram. We start with a prepositional phrase here, which we're going to skip for a minute. She is our subject. Showed, action verb, showed what? Signs is our direct object. And then we have a prepositional phrase. So we can stop and say we've got a pattern 7 with subject, transitive verb, direct object, pattern 7. Then we can go back and add our two prepositional phrases. At an early age is answering the question of when she showed these signs. When is an adverb question. It's diagrammed below that verb. And then of a nonconformity is clarifying what signs she was showing. So this is clarifying, modifying, qualifying the noun sign. So it's diagrammed below the direct object there. And we hit our that, which should send up all kinds of red flags and bells and whistles at this point. So we're on to the new clause, and then we have a verb. So we know that is functioning as the subject of our clause. So we have that subject, created as the verb, problems is the direct object receiving the action of created. So we have subject, action, verb, direct object, and then a prepositional phrase. In her family is telling us what kind of problems. It was family problems. So that goes below the direct object. So this one is also pattern 7, subject, action, verb, direct object. And now we just need to figure out how these are connected. The clause is telling what the signs were or what they did. They created problems in her family. It's not Florence Nightingale that created problems, so it's not going to go there. And it's not showing that created problem, it's the signs that created problems. And it can't be the preposition either. So it's just these signs that we connect with that to show how those two clauses are related. This one's a little bit simpler, nothing really complex going on as far as prepositional phrases or anything. She is our subject, tamed is the action verb. Tamed what? She tamed an owl, which is the direct object. And then we get to the comma and a new clause. So that's what we're working with right now, which makes it a pattern 7. Then we get to our which. There's our red flag word in red this time because it's operating as the subject of the clause. The verb is was, and was what? A pet is the noun that's working with that be verb as the subjective complement. And then we just got our modifiers here, the indirect or the article, sorry, the adjective, which is describing pet, and extremely is an adverb, which is describing how unusual it was. So it goes on that hook structure below. We're connected to the adjective. The hook structure we haven't seen very much, but if you just think about how words are related, it wasn't an extremely pet, it was an extremely unusual pet, and that makes sense. So with subject, be verb, noun, we have a pattern 3 sentence, and now we just need to connect them. What is this clause describing? It's describing the owl. And so we draw the line, the dotted line from the noun we're describing to the which is connecting. This one looks kind of odd, and sometimes it's hard to get things to connect, but the principle is the same. We're going to deal with the first clause. She studied, subject, action, verb. She studied what? Healthcare. And again, we're treating this as a subject. So it's both words are going to go on that direct object line. And where did she study it? In Germany. So that is a where question as an adverb. So we have a pattern 7 for our first clause, and then we get to this where that's underlined to show us that we're moving into the clause section now. So new diagram and new subject and verb. Activity is the subject. Would embarrass is the noun, are the nouns, I guess. And embarrass what or whom? Embarrass parents is the direct object. So we have subject, transitive verb, direct object is a pattern 7. We put our modifiers in. The possessive for activities, her. Not is kind of a weird word. We don't think of how it functions. We just think, oh, it's negative. But not is modifying the verb. It's turning it from positive to negative. So that goes underneath the verb. Again, another possessive. And then we get back to the where, which is an adverb question. So it too goes below the verb in that second clause. And then we have to figure out what's being related here. In this case, we're talking about Germany and the place. So this clause is describing Germany. So we're connecting Germany with the where that replaces it. This one looks complicated, but again, take it in little bits and it's not too difficult. First thing, separate out all of the prepositional phrases. And then we're left with the main elements of the sentence and break it into pieces as well. So our first clause is she devoted, is the subject and verb. She devoted what? She devoted hours is the direct object, and countless is what modifies that. So our main clause here is a pattern 7 with subject, action, verb, and a direct object. Then we put in our prepositional phrases. During the Crimean War is describing when, so it goes below that verb as an adverb. 2 British soldiers is, again, it's not ours to soldiers, but she's devoted to soldiers. So that's going to go underneath the verb as well. And then we are done with the first clause. We've got a who here as our subject and our red flag word. The verb is needed, and they needed what? A nurse is the direct object. So again, another pattern 7 with subject, action, verb, direct object. We put our 3 modifiers under what kind of nurse we're talking about, and then all we have left is to connect. So who needed a competent, compassionate nurse is talking about soldiers. It's not talking about ours. It's not talking about the war. It's not talking about her. It's soldiers. So we connect soldiers with the who, not the band. Noun is she, suspected is the verb. Suspected what? Reason is the direct object. We put our definite article there, and we've got our first clause done. Subject, verb, direct object, pattern 7. Now we move on. There's our red flag word why. We're going to skip that and go to subject and verb. Soldiers died. In the battlefield hospital is where, so that goes underneath. Many is modifying soldiers. And the why is an adverb question. It's diagrammed under the verb. So what is this why replacing or clarifying? It's the reason. And so we connect reason with why, and we are done. She heightened, subject verb, heightened what? Awareness is the direct object, so pattern 7. What awareness are we talking about? We're talking about the awareness of dangers. And what dangers? Dangers of infection. So these kind of just flow down from each other. And we are done with the first half of the sentence. And then we get to the next clause. 1 is our noun. Understood is the verb. Understood what? The which is functioning as the direct object here. No is modifying 1. It's making it negative. Clearly is the adverb. At that time is a prepositional phrase answering when. And then we connect with, what are we talking about? It was the infections that people didn't understand at that time. So we connect infection and which, and we have 2 pattern 7s. And last sentence, we have Florence Nightingale as our subject. Remains is a linking verb. And then we have a noun, so that makes it a pattern 5 with subject, linking verb, and noun as the subjective complement. We have a couple of prepositional phrases going on. What kind of figure is she? She's a figure of inspiration, is modifying figure, and she remains for nurses. It's not a figure for nurses, but she's remaining that example for nurses. So that goes under there. And then we have our clause. So we have the subject is who, follows the verb, an adverb, proudly, and a prepositional phrase functioning as an adverb in her footsteps, which go below. So subject, action verb with nothing following is a pattern 6. And then we just connect, what are we talking about? It's the nurses who are following in her footsteps. So we connect that noun nurses with the who that is replacing them and introducing the clause. Again, this is fairly complex. It's a lot to take in at one time. It's something that you will continue to see. So just remember, do one clause at a time, subject, verb, determine the sentence pattern, move on to the next clause, a new diagram, diagram that, identify it, and then figure out what's being described and how those 2 clauses are related.